I swear to you, I almost didn't make it out of that dorm room alive. Not because of a natural disaster or a freak accident, but because of the person I was forced to share a shoebox-sized space with for an entire academic year. I'm talking about a roommate so spectacularly awful, so unbelievably inconsiderate, and so utterly deranged, that I genuinely believe she was sent to test the limits of my sanity. I ended up calling the police on her, you guys. The police. And trust me, I had every right to. Was I wrong for what I did? Tell me, honestly, would you have done the same thing? Let's rewind to the beginning, back to the blissful ignorance of my freshman year. I was a wide-eyed, slightly naive 18-year-old, freshly emancipated from my parents' watchful gaze, and ready to embrace the freedom of college life. I pictured late-night study sessions, new friendships, maybe even a little romance. What I didn't picture was a living nightmare disguised as a human being named Tiffany. When I first got my dorm assignment, I was excited. I'd never had a roommate before, and I imagined us becoming best friends, sharing clothes, gossiping about boys, and pulling all-nighters together. I even went out and bought matching decorative pillows, a cringy but earnest gesture of goodwill. My half of the room was meticulously organized. My clothes were folded, my books neatly stacked, my desk sparkling clean. I believed in starting fresh, and I wanted my new home to reflect that. The day we moved in, I was there bright and early, unpacking and trying to make the sterile dorm room feel a little more personal. I picked the bed by the window, imagining myself studying with the sunlight streaming in. Tiffany arrived late in the afternoon, her parents trailing behind her, struggling under the weight of at least 10 oversized suitcases, several hat boxes, and what looked like a small taxidermied badger. I kid you not, a taxidermied badger. My first impression was overwhelming. Tiffany herself was a whirlwind of brightly colored, mismatched clothes, a cloud of sickly sweet perfume, and an immediate air of entitlement. She barely acknowledged my existence, marching straight past me to claim the other side of the room. Her parents, equally as aloof, just grunted a hello before depositing her belongings with a thud that shook the entire room. Within hours, my neatly organized half of the room was in stark contrast to Tiffany's side, which had become a war zone. Clothes were flung everywhere, empty fast food containers littered her desk, and the air was thick with the cloying scent of cheap perfume mixed with something vaguely rotten. The taxidermied badger, by the way, ended up on the shared mini-fridge, staring blankly at my carefully arranged fruit. I tried to be understanding. Moving is stressful, I told myself. Maybe she's just overwhelmed. Things will settle down. Oh, how wrong I was. Things didn't settle down, they escalated. The first week was a series of minor annoyances that I tried to brush off. Tiffany had a habit of leaving her dirty dishes on our shared desk for days, attracting a small ecosystem of fruit flies. She'd blast her questionable taste in music. Think death metal mixed with screamo, at all hours, even when I was trying to study for my calculus exam. She used my shampoo, my conditioner, my body wash, and even my expensive facial cleanser without asking, leaving the bottles empty or nearly so. I tried to gently bring these things up. Hey, Tiffany, I'd start, trying to sound friendly. Would you mind washing your dishes? They're starting to smell a bit. She'd just shrug, mumble something about being too busy, and then leave them there for another 2 days. When I asked her to turn down her music, she'd roll her eyes and blast it even louder. The shared mini-fridge became a battleground. I'd label my food, hoping to protect it from her ravenous appetite. It was pointless. My yogurt, my leftover pizza, my carefully portioned healthy snacks, all would mysteriously disappear, only to be replaced by her half-eaten, moldy leftovers. One morning, I opened the fridge to find my entire carton of oat milk gone. When I confronted her, she just stared at me blankly and said, "Oh, was that yours? I thought it was communal." Communal? Since when was my personal grocery haul communal? It wasn't just her lack of hygiene or her food theft that got to me. It was her complete disregard for my existence. She'd bring over random guys she'd just met at parties, sometimes in the middle of the night without any warning. They'd stumble in, loud and obnoxious, waking me up from a dead sleep. I'd have to pretend to be asleep under my covers, mortified, while they made out on her bed just a few feet away. I tried to talk to her about boundaries. I told her I needed to sleep, that I felt uncomfortable with strangers in our room, especially when I wasn't expecting them. She just laughed. "Lighten up," she'd say. "It's college. You're supposed to have fun." My definition of fun clearly differed drastically from hers. The dorm RA was useless. I went to her multiple times, explaining the situation, hoping for some intervention. She'd nod sympathetically, promise to talk to Tiffany, and then nothing would change. It was clear Tiffany had charmed her way out of any real consequences, or the RA simply didn't want to deal with the drama. I felt trapped. I couldn't switch rooms because all the dorms were full, and moving off campus wasn't an option financially. My grades started to suffer. I couldn't concentrate, I was constantly stressed, and I felt perpetually exhausted from the lack of sleep. My once bright college experience was turning into a bleak, lonely existence. I started spending all my time in the library, in the student union, anywhere but our dorm room. I dreaded going back there, knowing what fresh hell awaited me. The situation reached a breaking point about halfway through the semester. I had a huge midterm the next day, and I desperately needed a good night's sleep. Tiffany had been out all day, and I hoped she'd just crash when she got back. Around 2 a.m., she stumbled in, completely wasted, not alone. She had brought back a whole group of people, at least 5 of them, and they were all extremely loud. They started blasting music, shouting, and even jumping on her bed. I sat up, my heart pounding, tears welling up in my eyes. "Tiffany," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, I have a midterm tomorrow. Can you guys please be quiet?" She just looked at me, a drunken smirk on her face. "Oh, is the little baby trying to sleep?" she slurred, and her friends all snickered. One of them actually picked up the taxidermied badger and started dancing with it. That was it. My last nerve had been snapped. I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, shaking, and called my mom. I poured out the entire story, sobbing uncontrollably. My mom, bless her heart, was furious. She told me to go straight to the residential life office in the morning and demand a room change, no matter what. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was completely at my wit's end, feeling utterly powerless and desperate. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have tried to tough it out? Confronted her again? Gone to a higher authority? I'm genuinely curious about what you guys would have done in that impossible situation. The next morning, armed with a newfound resolve and fueled by a potent mix of anger and exhaustion, I marched straight to the residential life office. I didn't care if I was being a tattletale anymore. I just wanted peace. I explained everything to the housing director, detailing every single incident, from the stolen food to the late-night parties, the constant noise, the disregard for my personal space, and the emotional toll it was taking on me. I even showed her texts where I had politely asked Tiffany to stop, only to be met with mockery. The housing director, a stern-looking woman named Ms. Jenkins, listened with a surprisingly serious expression. When I finished, she sighed. "We've had some complaints about Ms. Miller before," she admitted, "but never to this extent." She promised to investigate immediately and said she would find me a new room, even if it meant moving me into a temporary space. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. That afternoon, I received an email confirming a room change for the following week. I was ecstatic. I packed my bags, ready to flee my personal hell. But Tiffany, it turned out, wasn't going to let me leave quietly. When I told her I was moving, she went ballistic. "You think you can just run away?" she screamed, her face contorted in a terrifying mask of rage. "You're pathetic. Nobody wants to live with you anyway." She started throwing her things around, knocking over lamps, and deliberately spilling a drink on my packed suitcase. I backed away, genuinely frightened. I knew I couldn't stay in that room for another minute. That night, after I'd moved all my important documents and valuables to a friend's room for safekeeping, I locked myself in my side of the room. I was scheduled to officially move out the next morning. Around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a chilling sensation. It was cold, damp, and there was a strange, earthy smell filling the room. I sat bolt upright and saw Tiffany standing over my bed, completely silent, a vacant stare in her eyes. In her hands, she was holding the taxidermied badger. But it wasn't just the badger. She was slowly, deliberately, pouring dirt from a small bag onto my pillow, right next to my face. Clumps of damp earth were falling onto my hair, my sheets, everywhere. My heart seized in my chest. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This felt genuinely psychotic. I scrambled out of bed, stumbling backward, trying to get away from her. "What are you doing?" I shrieked, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, just continued to pour the dirt, her eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. That's when I realized the badger wasn't just for show. There were little piles of dirt around its base, and she was adding to them. It looked like she was performing some kind of bizarre, twisted ritual on my bed. Terror shot through me. This wasn't just about a bad roommate anymore. I felt like I was in danger. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it, and I dialed 911. I whispered into the phone, explaining the situation as quickly as I could, feeling utterly surreal. "My roommate. She's pouring dirt on my bed. She has a taxidermied animal. I'm scared." The dispatcher asked for my dorm room number and assured me that officers were on their way. Tiffany, seemingly oblivious or uncaring that I was on the phone with the police, continued her bizarre dirt-pouring ritual. It felt like an eternity, but within minutes, I heard frantic knocking on our door. I practically leaped to open it, revealing two campus police officers looking very confused by the sight of a half-unpacked dorm room. A girl covered in dirt, and another girl silently pouring soil onto a bed next to a dead badger. The officers immediately took control. They separated us, asking me to step out into the hallway. I told them everything, from the beginning of the semester to the dirt incident. They then went into the room to talk to Tiffany. I could hear muffled voices, then Tiffany's shrill, defensive shouts. Eventually, they emerged, escorting a disheveled Tiffany out of the room. She glared at me, a look of pure hatred in her eyes, before she was led away. I never saw her again. I later found out she was immediately suspended from the university and had to move off campus. I was moved into a new room that very day, a single, blessed single, and the peace and quiet were almost overwhelming. It took me a long time to feel truly safe again, to not flinch every time I heard a sudden noise in the hallway. I had nightmares about the badger and the dirt for weeks. But ultimately, calling the police was the right decision. It saved me from what could have escalated into something far worse. And it finally gave me the peace I deserved. So, that's my crazy college roommate story. It's a stark reminder that sometimes, the biggest monsters aren't under your bed, but sleeping in the one next to you. I learned a lot about boundaries, about speaking up for myself, and about knowing when to ask for help, even if it feels extreme. It was a hellish experience, but I survived it, and I'm stronger for it. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I overreact? Or was Tiffany truly the world's worst roommate? I'll see you all in the next story.